What's up, guys? It is Thursday, May 14th, week 20 of 2020. We're still in the middle of quarantine here in New York City. I am in the middle of updating my web application that I use to keep myself organized and focused and motivated. I'm working on a new goals section, trying to get it implemented so that I can keep track of my goals on a daily basis, a weekly basis, a quarterly basis, and a yearly basis. You can see right here this week, we've just implemented this new goals section that you can see right here on velvetserenity.com. I've got my daily goals right here. These are all my goals for today, Thursday, May 14th. I've got my weekly goals, my goals for this week, week 20 of 2020, my quarterly goals for Q2 of 2020, and of course my yearly goals for the full year. I just got this up and running yesterday. You can check out the video on the implementation of that. There's a design video from the day before if you're interested in seeing how the design came together. But now that we've got the goals section, at least at its most basic iteration, it's functioning. I can start using it. I can't browse back to previous days. I can't really organize goals and move them around very well, but at least I can enter goals. I can mark them as completed. I can say which project those goals are assigned to. If it's a daily goal, if it's a weekly goal, if it's a yearly goal or quarterly goal, that's all a start. I'm in at the ground level on having a functioning goals system on my website, and I'm pretty excited about that. So why don't we jump in and figure out what are the next things that we need to do to take this to the next level. So basically, I have all of my work is kind of organized in what I call projects, and I can separate those projects. I can call them anything I want, but I've separated them out right here. As you can see, I've got personal projects, things that are related to me personally, things that I work on to improve myself, whether it's these YouTube videos, whether it's health stuff, whether it's, just journaling, thinking about, what's going on, keeping track of when I'm getting up, setting personal goals for myself. Then I've got Serenity. That's this app that I'm building that helps me keep all of this organized. Frederickson Studios, that's my photo studio where I make all my money. Future Purpose is a project I'm working on to try to figure out where we're all going as creatives, as human beings, and what our role is going to be in the future economy. So that's something that I'm excited to be doing a lot of work on over this summer, but not just yet, not this week. Real Model Stories is another project that I do with my model friends where we get together and we talk about the modeling business and do some photo shoots. That's kind of on hold right now too, because in the middle of quarantine, nobody's coming into the studio. We're not doing any collaborative work right now. So I'm focusing on this app, Serenity, trying to get my workflow really streamlined, trying to get this app up to the point where when we come through on the other side of this quarantine, I'm going to be really feeling good about my process and my workflow and ready to just really hit the ground running and hopefully jump right back into the economy as soon as things start to pick up again. So where are we at right now in terms of this app and the functionality of this app? We've got our projects, right? This is the main projects page that shows me everything for every project. Then I can drill down into specific individual projects. And if I click on Serenity, for example, you can see how that's designed. I've got to-dos already implemented, and notice I don't have them on the main projects page. That's something we need to add to the main projects page. We got these sub pages for projects, so we can drill down further in. So within Serenity, I've got the goals section, I've got the project section, the journal section, the booking section. This enables me to kind of reorganize my projects and have separate sub pages for them. And I've got the whole journal section. The goals section, you'll notice, doesn't have anything showing up in it yet, so that's something we still have to implement. But the important thing is here, I'm trying to get close to this Photoshop document that I've been working on to try to kind of visualize how I want this thing to look. And we're making slow progress day after day, getting closer every day. You'll notice if you go back a couple of videos, you can see what the site looked like a couple of videos ago. But we're actually getting pretty close to how we want this to look. So if you go back to the projects index page, that's the main one I'm working on right now. This shows me everything for every project. We've already got our list of projects here. Boom, that looks pretty good. We've got our goals section right here. Boom, that looks pretty good. You'll notice there's some slight styling differences. I haven't fully implemented all of the small details that are going to make the design really pop. You can notice the typography is not quite right. A little bit of extra spacing between letters. Maybe the size of the typeface isn't quite right. We don't have colors yet on projects. That's something that we still need to add, but at least the functionality is there, and that's what's so exciting. We've got our stats section over here. It's not graphed. That's going to be another week of work probably at some point if I have the time for it, to actually create graphs to see what my activity's been like over the past week or the past quarter or whatever it is that you want to view. Then we have our to-do section here, which you'll notice is implemented. We've got to-dos for individual projects. It's there in the back end. It's on the individual project pages, but I don't have it on the main projects page. So we need to get that added. And then we need to have the journal entries added down here, which you can see on the Photoshop document. So tasks, I'm calling them not to-dos. I called them to-dos in the back end, but I think tasks sounds a little bit nicer. And then here we've got the journal section. And so this is already implemented, like I said, on individual project pages. It's just a matter of getting that code section, those code sections implemented on the main project page and showing the information for every project so I can get an overview of where I'm at with everything. And then as you want to, you can jump into individual projects and drill down and really hone in on what you want to focus on for that given day. So the thing that I want to focus on today, it's something that I call code partials. And when you use different bits of code in different parts of the website, but it's the same chunk of code, you just need to tell it what the data is you want that code to use. So for example, this section of the goals right here, it's the same section of code that shows goals for my daily goals, or if I switch here to my weekly goals, or to my quarterly goals, or to my yearly goals. It's the same front end code. I just tell it what is the data I want to use in that code. And the data comes from the back end. So my controller, it's something that this framework that I'm using called Ruby on Rails, it separates things out into views. That's the front end, what the way the stuff is displayed. Then you've got the controllers, which kind of tell you what kind of data you want to have in those displays. And it's nice because the actual displays are kind of data agnostic. They just tell you how to display the data, but they don't know what the data is. The controller says, I know that you want this specific data in that view. So what we can have here is we can have the same code for each one of these tabs in its own partial, and then we just tell it to use that partial in different places. We can have the same code for goals here being used on the goals section on the individual project page here. So we need to create partials for these. And when I started implementing the goals section, you'll notice here in the code, if we open up the project index page, let's see here. So this is our section for the weekly goals. Right there. Boom. That entire section of code right there is exactly the same as this section here for the quarterly goals, because the display is exactly the same. The only difference is I'm saying display this for all of the quarterly goals. So quarterly goals dot each. And in the controller, I define what that variable quarterly goals holds. And that just pulls the quarterly goals out of the database. In this, in the weekly goals section, it just says weekly goals dot each. Do, which means that for each of the weekly goals, display this bit of code. So what we can do is we can create a partial. Now this is a part of the goals section. So we're going to create that in the goals section. We're going to go to VSP is just a way within this text editor to basically say create a new text document that's split vertically so that I can see them both on the page at the same time. So VSP, app, views, goals. And now when we create partials, we always start the file name with an underscore. That means that this isn't a file that gets displayed on its own. It gets displayed as a partial bit of code within another file. So another file is going to have to reference this partial. So I'll show you how that works. So we're going to call this partial goals list, and we'll say .html.erb. ERB is the server code that enables us to kind of combine server data with front end data, and this all gets then compiled down to HTML, which is what the actual browser sees at the end of the day. So here's our html.erb file. It's a goals list partial, and all we're going to want to do here is copy this entire section. So we've got weekly goals. Boom. Boom. I think, nope, we missed a div. We missed a closing div. So boom, we're just going to delete that. We're not going to need that in there anymore because now we're going to reference this partial whenever we want to display this section of code over there. So let's paste that in here, and we can say div ID. So here's the thing. We're going to want to, and I'll show you how you reference this partial over here. So now we can say, I believe it's a equal sign in that. Let me see, render partial. What is the actual code for rendering a partial in Rails? It is an equal sign. That's what I thought. An equal sign, when you're opening up a bracket to tell ERB that this is server code that you want to execute, when you use an equal sign at the beginning of that, it means that you want to essentially render this code to the browser as HTML. So here we have render partial, and we'll do it this way, partial colon, and then we just say goals / goals list. And you'll notice I didn't include the underscore at the beginning of goals list, because when you're telling Rails to render a partial, it knows to look for something that starts with an underscore, because all partials by what's the word that they call it? I'm blanking on the word, but just the way that you're supposed to do it in Rails. You're supposed to use an underscore for partials, and that way Rails knows to look for it with an underscore. You don't have to include the underscore when you're saying render partial. Okay, and now what we can do is we can pass data to that partial, and I have to double check the syntax for that. But let's just see here on this page. If we wanted to pass data to a partial, and you don't even have to say render partial, do you? You can just say render. That's really cool. Partial is assumed. So let's get rid of that partial text. So just render, and now it knows to look for this specific file. And now we're going to pass data to it, and we're going to say that data is, that data that we need to pass to it is what type of, well, first of all, the object. So the goals object that we want to pass to it. And we're going to call that goals. And in this case, we want to pass it the weekly goals object that we got out of our controller. Weekly goals. And that's going to come into the partial with a variable of goals. So now we've got weekly goals, and we also want to pass to it type, goal type. And you know what? It's already built into the weekly goals object, I believe. Yes, it is. Cool. So we can just do it like that. So now we passed this weekly goals object right here that you can see on the left to this partial from the original view file. So now we have this variable, but we renamed it to just be goals. And I don't think you use an @ symbol because I think it's a local variable. Not positive on that. Let's look and see if they show us an example of that form for search. Yeah, exactly. You don't use an @ symbol in partials when you're having the variable be passed from the original view. An @ symbol before a variable name basically means that it's a bigger global variable that gets passed down from the controller. But in this case, that's not what this is. So we have goals.each do, and now the rest of our code should just work. Now, the biggest thing that we have to worry about here, though, is that we have certain class names or IDs that say ID weekly goals or quarterly goals or yearly goals. So we need to figure out what type of goal this is, and we need to make the text come from that. So here, instead of saying weekly, we're going to say, get this from the server, and we're going to check the goals.first object. No, this is not, we can't just pull it from the data, because what happens if the goals object is empty? If the goals that we're passing to it, like there aren't any goals for that specific section, like we didn't create any weekly goals yet, in that case, it's just going to be empty and we can't reference the first object. So we can't figure out what type of goals we're talking about here. So we actually have to explicitly state, we're going to pass that as another variable. We're going to say goal type. In this case, we want it to be weekly, or we can make that a string, weekly. If I can spell that correctly. So we're going to pass that as a variable called goal type. And in this case, then, all we have to do is we have to say, reference that goal type variable, and boom. Now, instead of saying weekly underscore goals, it's saying goal type underscore goals, where goal type is being defined as whatever I say it is when I render that partial in the original view. So that should be that. Now let's just search through this partial to make sure there weren't any other references to week. There we go. Here where it says create a weekly goal, it now needs to say create a, and we're going to use a double quotation mark here because that enables us to, we're going to say here, goal type dot titleize, I think. It's either titleize or capitalize. Rails titleize. I believe that capitalize is the first letter. Oh, interesting. Titleize capitalizes the first letter of every word within that string. It doesn't matter in this case because we're only ever going to have one word in the string. It's only either going to be weekly, quarterly, yearly, or what was the other one? Daily. Daily. Got it. So in that case, titleize is fine. But generally speaking, capitalize is probably more what we want, which is just the first letter of the first word in the sentence. But in this case, we only have one word, so we could say titleize, but we're going to say capitalize. And let's just make sure that that's actually a real Rails thing, and I'm not just making that up. There it is. String.capitalize. Exactly. Beautiful. Capitalize is the first letter. Excellent. So now we have create a weekly goal, or in this case, a goal type capitalized goal, which will render out to either be weekly or daily or whatever you put when you render the goal type in the original view. And in this case, we're going to say a new goal path with a period of, and not weekly, but goal type. And a class of new goal link if weekly goal. So if the goals object that we pass to it that has all the goals in it that we want to display, if that's empty, if there are no goals to display, that's when we display this link that says, would you like to create a new goal? Because if there are no goals to display, we just put a box there that says, would you like to create one? So in this case, we're going to say if, and this variable is no longer weekly goals in the partial, it's just goals. So if, I have an extra period there, goals.empty. And voila, that should now work. Let's save both of these files. So what we've done here is take the code that was getting repeated in multiple different sections, we put it into a partial, and now we simply reference that code whenever we want to use that code in different sections on the site. So if we want to make changes to that code, we make changes to that one partial file, and it'll change every other place where that partial file is referenced. And you don't have to go and edit the same code in multiple different places across the site. It cleans up your code base, and it gets things nice and organized. So that is now our goals list is nice and complete, nice and organized. Let's commit that change to Git. First, we have to add that file. Git add app views goals star git status. There's our files. Git commit -am making or creating goals partial and cleaning up goals list on project index page. So the nice thing about creating this partial now is notice how when we go to the actual individual project pages, we have this goal section here, right? And we want that to use the exact same code, the exact same design, the exact same layout as the goals section that we have here on the main project pages or the index project page. So what we can do now is we can just go to that projects show page, which is the page that gets referenced anytime you're showing an individual project, and we can use that partial. So have views projects show, and you know what? We'll pull up the index page and just copy it directly off of there. So here we have render goals list. Let's look for goals on here. Awesome. Let's pull up the partial just to see exactly what the code is in it, so I know where to start and end this on. So what I'm actually deleting from the goals show page. So let's view goals / goals list. Right. So that starts with the div of class goal list. Awesome. So we delete that entire div. And what is the, all right, so then it's project.goals.each. Cool. So then we say, we'll copy it directly from here. Render goal daily goals. Awesome. We also want to have our goal tabs. So let's say here, after the new goal link, we have our goal tabs. Then we render daily goals. Let's just copy the whole thing. So there we have our daily goals, weekly goals, quarterly goals, and yearly goals. But I believe that in this case, we don't have these variables for daily goals, weekly goals, quarterly goals, and yearly goals being defined on the project show action in the controller. So let's pull up that controller action and let's see if we can define those in the same way that we did on the index page, but with the one caveat being that these are the goals that are only for this specific project that we're looking at. So let's pull up the controller. Here we have the index page where we pull out those, where we define those variables. So let's copy that and let's just paste that into the show controller action. But in this case, we're going to say current, instead of current user.goals, we're going to say project.goals. And project gets defined. I'll show you where. There's an action that gets called for specifically. You can see at the top of the page here. So before everything else happens, we authenticate the user, we call an action called get or create journal day, and we call an action called set project, but we only call it on the show page, the edit page, the update page, the destroy page, and the archive and unarchived pages, because those are not pages, but actions. Those are actions that are actions on specific individual projects, and not like the index action, which is a collection of all of projects that you want to be displaying. So we call this action set project, which is defined down here, and where we say at project, or the project variable is set to current user.projects.find, and then whatever the ID is that gets passed in from the browser. So when the browser says, I want to see project 5, first it double checks and makes sure, hey, is this a project that belongs to this user that's logged in right now? And if not, it throws an error. But anyway, so that's the project variable. So let's go back to on the show page. So instead of saying current user.goals, which is going to pull all of the goals for the current user, that would be on the index page. We want to see all the goals for the current user. In this case, we only want to see goals that are associated with this specific project, which gets defined based on whichever project we're viewing. So this should work. So if we save that and we save this new partial stuff that we've put in here on the project show page, and we refresh this, boom, we are now only seeing goals that are specifically for Serenity. Now, here's one interesting thing that I'm realizing. We go back to the project's index page. Do we have any goals that are Serenity goals? We don't. But what I want to test, and let's do this. Let's go back to Serenity. Well, let's go back to the index page. Let's create a new daily goal. And let's call this is a Serenity goal. And the period's going to be daily. It's a daily goal. The project, though, we're going to change it to Serenity, not the personal project. And now it redirects me back to the Serenity project. And you can see here, it shows up right here. Whereas before, we didn't have any goals visible. So we go back to the project's index page. We can see all of the goals for the personal project and the Serenity project, and any other goals for any other projects. But if I click on Serenity, it only shows me the goals for Serenity. If I click on personal, it only shows me the goals for personal. Now, here's another question. What if I go back to Serenity and I drill down into the goals section? So let's say I'm working on the goals section. I want to create goals specifically for my work on the goals section. Well, this is interesting. We have an error. Goal type is not a valid, period. Params, period. Equals goal type. Okay, that is a bug that we have introduced in our partial. So in the link, got you. That should fix that. So what I was saying in the link, originally we had code that was saying pass the period type, and we just spelled it out differently for each time we viewed this code. But in this case, we wanted it to use the actual variable that we're passing to the code partial, which is called goal type. And when I put that colon in front of it, that meant to make that a string. I don't want it to be a string. I want it to reference that variable and have the period be set to whatever that goal type is set to. So if I get rid of that colon, that should now work. So if we go back to that page, we refresh this page, that should refresh this link. Now, when I click on that link, it has a goal type of daily, which automatically sets it here. Whereas if I were to go to week 20 and I create a weekly goal, it's automatically set here because in the URL, it's set the period to weekly. Awesome. So what I wanted to test here was when you're now inside of Serenity, but then you go into a deeper sub-project of Serenity. We go into the goals section of Serenity. Now we want to create a goal for this specific sub-project. Notice how it didn't set this. We have to update that at some point. We're not going to worry about that right now, but we wanted to set a goal for this sub-project of Serenity. So this is a Serenity goals goal. And boom, we can see it here. We can see that the project type, the project itself, the name of the project is Serenity-goals. But if we go back to the Serenity project, my guess is that doesn't show up. It doesn't. And the reason it doesn't show up is right now we're only pulling goals for the Serenity project. We're not also including all sub goals or all goals of sub projects underneath the Serenity project. So that would have to be some sort of recursive function that we're going to have to write. And let's think that through. How would that work? So we're going to close this page. I like to clear out things that aren't relevant to exactly what I'm working on, because I'm going to have to think this one through and figure out exactly how to make this work. We don't need to see the index page. We don't need to see, do we need to see the controller? Yes, the controller is the only place where this matters. So in the controller, when we're pulling our daily goals, our weekly goals, our quarterly goals, and our yearly goals, we're simply saying right now, take all of the goals that belong to the project, right? But in this case, we want to not only include the goals that belong to the project, we want to include all of the goals that belong to the sub project. So I think what we're going to do is we're going to, in the project model. So let's open the project model. What you can see is the project has many goals, which means that we can reference all of the goals that belong to this project by just saying project.goals. But what if we want to include the goals of also child projects? So we can define a method like I did here with title with parents that enabled us to return a title that includes the parent projects for an individual project. Instead of just saying project.title, it includes all of the parent projects. In this case, we want to include the child projects, the goals of the child project. So we'll call this goals including children. And okay, so child, or let's just say goals equals, let's say goals list, because I think goals is already reserved because we already have the word goals meaning something in this model. So we're going to say goals list equals goals. It might have to be self.goals, but we'll just say goals and test that out. Then we're going to say, oh man, this is interesting. How do we get a list of all of the child projects, including children of children and children of children? That's a recursive function. We're going to have to make that a separate function. Define child projects recursive, because this isn't just the projects that are direct children, but also the children of the children. So what we need to do to make this work, to return an array of all of the projects, we need to while, okay, so equals self, while current project. Not exactly sure how to do this. I'm going to Google this and see if I can find out exactly if somebody else has done something similar. Rails return list of all children, including children's children. I'm not sure if children's the right term here. Rails select all children of children. I'm not sure if that works. I'm curious if it does, though. We can test this in our console. So in our console, we can say, so project, and in this case, we want to do the Serenity project. So find by title, Serenity. So let's name that P. Oh, it's just project one. So P equals project.first. Okay, so that's the Serenity project. Now we want to say P dot, and what are they? So project has many projects. So P dot projects, so these are the children projects, includes projects. That would be the sub projects. Well, let's just first count how many sub-projects, just first level sub-projects, the Serenity project has. So p.projects.count is 9. Is that correct? Let's go here to projects, Serenity, right here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and archived 9. That is correct. So now what happens if we include, which is, I think is what this is saying, the projects, children's projects. If I said that right. Let's count that. That's also 9. So that didn't help anything. So I'm not quite sure what this code is trying to accomplish here. How to find, there we go. Get all children of children and so on. You can add a custom method to gather all the children of a customer and children and so on. Class customer, define descendants, self.children or self.children.map.descendants.flatten. Why is it an or? So if self.children is false, it will use this other thing. So what we're going to try to do is we're going to try to say .map. So p.projects.map, what's the syntax? Ampersand, colon, projects.map subprojects of these projects. And then we're going to flatten that because that's going to be an array inside an array. And then we're going to count that. That only gets me 7. What if we don't flatten it? That gets me 9. What exactly does flatten do then in that case? Because here's the thing. If we actually went and counted them, we know that goals has 0 sub-projects. Projects has 0. Maybe there aren't any sub ones. Journal has 2. So we should be at least up to 11 now. Bookings has 0. Clients has 0. User has 0. Cash flow has 3, so we should be up to 14. To-dos has 0. And RSS has 0. And you'll notice here we have this thing called archives, where basically instead of deleting projects, we can archive them before we delete them in case we want to like not have them be visible, maybe bring them back later and have them kind of be on the back burner. So in this case, we should be up to 14, including all of the children's projects. So we know that that's the number we're trying to get out of this. The question is, how do we get that? So projects.map, that doesn't seem to work. Array of all descendants of the customer. So in this case, descendants is referencing the, got you. Okay, I see exactly how this works. This becomes recursive because it's calling itself unless it doesn't have any children. So I'm a little confused by the ordering of this because you would think it would have to do this first. But let's just test that out. So in this case, what we need to do here is we need to call this define descendant projects. So that's going to be, we'll just call it goals including children. Okay. So we're calling the thing, instead of calling descendants, we're going to call it goals including children. We're going to return self.projects or self.projects.map ampersand colon goals including children dot flatten. Let's test that. Let's exit IRB and restart it. And we're going to say project.first, that's the Serenity project, dot goals including children. If this works, I'm going to crack up. It looks like it worked. I'm going to hit count. Did we get 14? We got 16. 16. Interesting. How did we get 16? I think it worked. But let's verify that it worked. So Serenity has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And then, well, you know what? Let's just list them. Instead of, so now we're going to say each do p puts p.title end, and that should be a list of all of them. So it is to-dos, cash flow, user, clients, bookings, goals, RSS, journal, and projects. Then we have cash flow account, cash flow transaction, cash flow income, RSS source, RSS article, journal entries, and journal days. Why didn't I see those under RSS? Oh, because they're archived. That's why I missed those two. 16. Voila. We got a nice recursive function by copying somebody else's code on the internet in a way that I never would have been able to write myself. Best way to learn is from seeing how other people have figured out what the most efficient code for a situation is. And hopefully you can find something that is exactly what you need to be doing, like we just did in that case. So thank you. Who is this user? Come on, Stack Overflow. Barnacle. I need to rate this up. I need to say, let's sign in. I don't even know what my sign in for Stack Overflow is. Do I use Facebook for that? It's always nice when you come across an answer that's just like so perfect for exactly what you need. It's always nice to give it an upvote, to comment on it and say, thank you so much for this. This is exactly what I was looking for. Add comment. And a little clap for Barnacle M. Mr. Barnacle M with 1,651 score. Wait, no. Is that the original guy who posted that? Answered Jagdeep Singh. Who knows? That's Stack Overflow. Anyway, we have our solution. So now what we can do is we can go into, so we have on our model, we now have a function that is recursive that includes all of the children. But we don't want it to just be goals including children. We want it to be projects including children. You know what? Let's just call it descendants. I like that. Or descendant projects. Beautiful. Okay. So in this case, we now want to say on the show page, For our daily goals, we don't want to just get project.goals. We want to get project. Oh, yeah. So now we need a separate method to combine all of the goals for all those projects. We need to iterate through all of those descendant projects. So actually, we do want to call it goals including children. No, we don't. We're going to have, first, we're going to get all the descendant projects in an array. Then we're going to go define descendant, or you know what, goals including children, or no, descendant project goals including children, because we want to make sure it includes the goals from this project. So goals including children and so, or maybe including descendant projects, because that's the terminology we're using here. So we're going to say all goals equals goals. So that would be this project's goals. And then we're going to say descendant projects that each do project. And for each project, we're going to take all goals. I forget if you can do it like this. I think we need to do it individually. So then we go then we go project.goals.each. Do goal. Rather than just taking the entire array and adding it to the all goals array, that'll add an array inside of an array, and we need to flatten it out. So maybe the flatten method is the way to do it, but this is an easier way to do it. As far as I'm concerned, it just rolls off the tongue for me better, even though it might not be quite as concise. But it's more visually representative of what is actually happening. So that's useful to be able to glance at code and be able to understand exactly what it does. So of all the descendant projects, for each project, we're going to iterate through each goal that project has, and we're going to add each of those goals to the all goals variable. So all goals gets this specific goal. Let's pause right there. So the rest of this video is going to be me trying to figure out what went wrong in my implementation of this goals function. So what we're doing here is we're taking all of the goals from the current project, we're putting them into a variable called all goals. Then we were running through all of the descendant projects, and we're taking each of their goals and we're assigning them to this all goals array. The problem is Rails has this handy function where when you assign an object to an array of objects, what it does is it updates this object to have the same parent project ID as these ones do. So because these are all the goals from this particular project, it's going to say, let's update because you want to apply these to this array of goals that are from this project. Let's also say that these are from this project. So it actually goes and it updates the database and it says, let's make this goal, the project ID for this goal, let's make it the same as the project IDs for this goal, which is really useful when you want to say, hey, I want this object to be a child of this object. But that's not what we're trying to do here. We're just trying to get together an array of goals. So I'm trying to remember here how I actually ended up fixing this. Let's pull up the code before I let the video continue, because the rest of the video is just going to be me finishing up this implementation and then trying to figure out where this bug got implemented. And then at the end, I posted a question on Stack Overflow and got a really insightful answer. And you know what? Let's pull up that question. In my question, I said, I have a method to pull all child objects, but it's updating the child objects. We don't want to update them. We just want to so I actually ended up getting rid of that assignment and using concat, which actually does the same thing. It also updates the project for this specific goal. So the answer was, it happens because concat adds the items to self.goals, an active record relation object, and updates it immediately. You can get around this by casting it to an array, which was a nice option. So you cast everything out to an array. So this all goals variable is no longer an active record object. It is now just an array of goals. And then you can take these goals and cast them to an array and then assign them to this. And then all of a sudden, you just have an array of goal objects. So in my view, I was basically saying, once I took this array of goals that included the descendant goals, I wanted to be able to run .where on it, which means that it still needed to be an active record object. So if I casted them all to an array, I wouldn't be able to run things like .where or say the different types of goals, like .weekly or .daily, in order to be able to run further differentiation on those objects. So what I realized I had to do is I had to do that differentiation here in this method before I could then cast it all to an array and then just basically hand that array of goal objects back to the view or the controller. So this is what I ended up with. It's fun when you're in the middle of doing an edit, and by the time you get to the point where you couldn't figure out what was going wrong, you've already now figured it out after the fact. So I'm going to let this video continue so you can see my thought process and how I kind of try to debug this issue. But it's nice now that at least you're going to be able to see that this is how the issue was resolved before you see how the issue ended up causing problems. So anyway, the resolution for this was to basically say all goals gets, and then we specify, we have to actually pass the goal type to this method now. We also have to pass the period, the beginning period and the end period, because we're going to do all of our database selection in this function, so that once we actually pass things out, or once we start assigning these actual goals, we can do it as an array and not as an active record object, because there's no way to assign one object to another active record object without updating that original object to be a child of that new active record object, which is not what we wanted to do. So you can see here, this is what the code looks like. We do all of our selection right here. We cast that to an array. You can see here at the end. Then we go through each descendant project. We do the selection so that we're just getting the descendant projects that fit the criteria that we're asking for. What type of goal is it? And what is the period, the beginning of the period and the end of the period? And then we're casting that to an array. We're assigning that to the original all goals array, and then we're flattening that array so that we just have a large array of all of the goals, which is what we wanted to do at the end of the day. And then that gets passed back out to our view over here. And as you can see, we are rendering, we're rendering daily goals, but that's actually being defined in the controller. So let's pull up the controller and the show. So you can see right here, daily goals is getting this project, dot goals including descendants, which is that method that we wrote. And then we're going to say, in this case, we want goal type daily, and the period is going to be beginning of day up until end of day. And then the same thing for weekly, beginning of week up until end of week. So now we have a nice method that can recursively pull out all of the goals of this project and its descendant projects, and then cast them all to an array and pass that array back to the front end, so that the front end can then iterate through that array and actually display all of the goals from that array. And let's take a look at what that ends up looking like on the website. This is on the project show page. And the nice thing is now on Serenity, I can see not just the goals for the specific Serenity project, but also the goals for the sub-project. So you can see here, these goals are for Serenity goals. That's a sub-project of Serenity, which normally I'd only be able to see those on this page, on the sub-project page, but I'm actually seeing them on the main page as well. So that's really exciting. This is now fully functional. And I thought it would be fun to at least jump into the middle of this edit and give you guys a breakdown of how this problem ended up getting resolved. But if you're interested in watching me kind of bang my head on the table trying to figure out what I'm doing wrong here, because I didn't fully understand that assigning an active record object to an array of active record objects updates that active record object, which we don't want to be doing. So anyway, let's continue the video. Enjoy watching me struggle to figure this out, but at least you can see here what the final resolution for this problem ended up being. So anyway, back to the video. Now, once all of that is done, that should return. Let's just make sure that we are returning all goals, which is the final list. So now, if we say project.goals including children for daily goals, test, no, that didn't work. Did you mean goals including descendant projects? We did. We named descendant projects, not children. .daily. And I'm not sure if you can say .daily, but let's just test this. So now in Serenity, it says this is a Serenity goals goal, but it's saying that the project is just Serenity when it should be Serenity goals. So Let's see if that's not displaying correctly here. It is not displaying correctly here. So something happened in our goals partial. I think we got this code working right. So now when we go to project show page, so we go to the Serenity project, it's showing me not just goals for Serenity, but also all of Serenity's descendant projects goals. So let's figure out what the bug is that's causing the project title to not be displayed correctly when it's a sub-project of another project. So let's open up our partial goals _goals list. And for the project title, goal.project.title with parents. Why is title with parents not returning the parents? So let's go to goal.last. That should be, this is a Serenity goals project. It is. Okay. Project ID is 1. Oh, you know what? I didn't actually set that correctly. So let's go to edit that project. Look at that. The project is Serenity. It should be Serenity goals. Now let's go back to projects index and there. Okay, so that's correct. So, we weren't even testing this, right? Let's go back to the Serenity show page and it's not showing it here. Why not? It's showing it on the projects index page. Wait a second. Something about, that's so funny. Something about one of these methods that I created is actually updating the project that this goal is assigned to, and it's changing it from being Serenity, the goals sub project of Serenity, to being just Serenity. Let's test that out just out of curiosity. So goal.last is set to have a project ID of 1. We know that's the Serenity project. Let's go and edit that goal because we wanted that to be part of the Serenity goals project. The Serenity goals project has an ID of 49. So if we look at that in the database again, we can see project ID is 49. Now, for some reason, when I refresh this page, it still works. If I go to the projects index page, it still works. If I hit refresh, it still works. What is going on? If I go to the projects show page, it doesn't work anymore. So all of a sudden, as soon as I loaded the project show page, something on that page is changing the project ID to be 1 instead of 49. So somehow, instead of just pulling data from the database, we're updating data in the database. So we need to track down that goal. This is only happening on the show page. On the show page, we're saying goals, including descendant projects. So let's pull up that method. Let's just simply not call that method just to, I'm not even sure how to test this. This is really confusing. Somewhere in one of these two methods that we created, it's actually updating all goals equal goals. Self.projects.map, that shouldn't update anything. What if we comment this out? And now descendant projects will only include the immediate child projects. Let's comment that out and see if that has any effect on our code. Okay, so let's go back and edit this one to again be Serenity goals. Look, that's correct. Okay, let's go back to the projects index page. Totally fine there. Let's go to the Serenity show page. It still gets changed back. So we know it's not that bit of code. It's a nice way to kind of like try to track down a bug in your code is to get rid of sections of code and see if that bug still persists. And if it does, you know it's not inside those sections. So now we've honed it down into, I believe, this goals including descendant projects function. So all goals equal goals. That's a variable. That should be fine. Descendant projects dot each do project. So maybe instead of equals goals, let's set it to an empty array and then add undefined method daily for array. Yeah. So we can't just add it like that. We have to add it like this. Goals.each do goal, all goals. There's got to be a method for doing exactly what I'm doing there. And what happens if we just delete all of this code and just return a blank array? No, that doesn't work. What if we do that? And that should just return the immediate goals. So let's edit this back to there. Let's go back here and okay. So now it's not showing that goal anymore. But if we go to the sub goals project, it's still there. So at least in this case, it's not being updated. So we know that somewhere along the way, this is actually changing something. Let's say Rails concatenate arrays. So take two arrays and combine them, or merge them, or join them. Appends the elements of other arrays to self. Yeah, that's exactly what it wants. So if I take an array that has A as one object and B as another object, and I concatenate it with an array that has C as an object and D as an object, I end up with an array that is A, B, C, and D. It's exactly what we want to do. We can say all goals.concat project.goals. I don't know if that's going to fix our issue, but let's go back up to Serenity. And it didn't fix our issue, but it basically changed our code to just still be exactly the same code as what we had before. What else could be updating this? So another thing to do. So if we go here, it's correct. Now, if we go to our log for this local server, we'll clear it out so that anything that happens now is only what we see. Now, if I click on the Serenity project, we will see what code just got executed. Load, rendering show, project 1, rendering goals list multiple times. Let's just search for update. Here we go. Here is where it's telling it to update it. Set goals, project ID to 1. Why? What is causing this to happen? It's happening on the project's show page. Goal load. Man, so weird. And only this one goal is getting updated. I'm thoroughly stumped. All goals, including descendant projects. Maybe this is a good question for Stack Overflow, because I don't see anything in here that should be telling it to update that goal. Project.goals, including descendant projects. .daily, meaning make it only daily projects. Curious if this will happen for weekly projects. Let's set this to be a Serenity Goals project or Serenity Bookings project. And we'll say this is a weekly Serenity Bookings project. Okay, so we go to weekly. In the Serenity Bookings project, it shows up correctly. What if we just go here and we look at weekly goals? It shows up under weekly goals and the goal project is correct. Now let's go to the Serenity project. Should it show up under the weekly goals? It does, but it's changed it to not be the Serenity Bookings project, but to be just the Serenity project. What is happening? Only on the show page. And you know what's funny? I didn't even update on the show page to say project dot goals including descendant projects for the weekly ones, because it somehow got updated to that. What is happening? Let's just call goals there, and let's update this. Let's go to the weekly goal and let's edit that to again be Serenity Bookings. Update goal. Let's go back to Serenity and go to weekly. And it doesn't show it because it's still set to be a sub-project. Now we're not calling the sub-project goals. We're only calling the goals for this main project. So if we want to say goals including descendant projects, you know what? I think I should just say descendants. That would be much nicer. Let's change that to descendants. Now, if we refresh and look at the weekly, it's there, but it's updated it. What is causing this to update? Let's Google it. Rails.map is updating object. Just out of a guess. Is this happening with the .map function? Nope, not seeing anything like that. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to get this into a Stack Overflow question, and I'll show you how I formulate a Stack Overflow question. Because honestly, sometimes when you really break down the question in a way that other people can understand, you find out exactly what you did wrong just by explaining it to other people. So that can be a really good debugging technique when you've kind of run out of other things to do. And then the nice thing is, at the end of the day, if even breaking it down for other people doesn't help you answer it yourself, maybe somebody else will come along and have an answer for you. So let's go to Stack Overflow. stackoverflow.com. Let's ask a question. Let's say calling or function. I don't even call these functions or methods. Method to pull method 2 pull all child objects is updating child objects. I don't know, that's not a very good title. Maybe we'll figure out a better title as we type this out. I have a project model that can have itself as sub-projects, defined as project.projects. And then we will include the code for that. So the code for that looks like this. Class project. Three tildes, class copy. Sometimes it doesn't like to copy. Let's do that. Class project and indent, let's say, has many projects right here. And has many goals because goals are relevant. Each project has many goals. I am trying to write a method in the project model that will enable me to gather all of the goals of this project and its children projects recursively for all sub projects. Make sure that we end this code block here with three tildes. All right, so now let's copy and paste that. When I call project dot goals including descendants, project ID for the children's projects are getting updated to be direct goals of the original parent project. What part of this code would be causing Rails to trigger a database update? I can see it in my console as, and let's copy that directly from the console. I am totally stumped as to why this is happening. Thanks for any insight. All right, well, it didn't help me in terms of figuring out what's going on, but let's reread it just to make sure this makes some sense to other people. So I have a project model that can have itself as sub-projects defined as project.projects. So we have class project of the application record that has many projects. The foreign key for to know which project it belongs to is parent project ID, class name project. You know what I'm missing? Something in here that says that we can basically have belongs to parent project and has many. Yeah, so we need this belongs to parent project as well in addition to that. So let's say up here, not just has many, but belongs to parent project, class name project, optional true. So what that means is if it's a sub project, then it belongs to a parent project, but that's optional. And the class name for that parent project is project, which is exactly this class. It also has many sub-projects, which we're just calling projects. The foreign key for that, meaning that we have a column in our database that says parent project ID, which references which project it belongs to. The class name for that project, meaning the model name is project. And dependent destroy means that if we destroy the parent project or delete the parent project, we also delete all of these sub-projects. We also have a line that says has many goals. So every project has many goals. That's pretty simple. So each project has many goals. I'm trying to write a method in the project model that will enable me to gather all of the goals of this project and its children projects recursively, meaning all branches of those subprojects for all subprojects. So those methods are defined as, first, we define a method called descendant projects, where we are returning the projects of this current project. Self.projects, or if that's empty, I'm not entirely sure how this piece of code works, and that makes me think that that's probably where our bug is. But either way, there's nothing in this that should make the database get updated. But where were we? Let's say here. So otherwise, we map all of the descendant projects, and that happens recursively because it calls itself. So now we have define goals including descendants. So all goals equals goals. Or maybe that needs to be self.goals. What if we make that self.goals? Just out of curiosity. Just because I know that's actually common syntax to reference self when you're inside. You know, and that'll be really funny if in doing this long question for Stack Overflow, we end up fixing it, which often happens in this case. So let's update this goal again to be a bookings goal. I think it was, right? Yeah, this is a Serenity bookings project. Cool. So that's a weekly Serenity's booking project. We can see here the project name is Serenity Bookings. It shows up here as a weekly goal. It's still correct. Now, when we load the project show page, does it do that update again? It still does. Yeah. Okay. So that didn't fix it. So let's just make sure that we update this to at least be the same as our code here. We'll say self.goals. So I'm trying to write a method in the project model that's clear here, that this is inside the project model that will enable me to gather all the goals of this project and its children projects recursively for all subprojects. All right, so that's our code. We pull all of the goals for this particular project. Then we run descendant projects.each. Descendant projects we know just returns an array of all the projects. And for each one, we just simply add in, we concatenate all of the goals for that project into our all goals variable. And then we return our all goals variable. When we call this project.goals including descendants, the project ID for the children's projects are getting updated to be in the database to be direct goals of the original parent project. What part of this code would be causing Rails to trigger a database update? Question mark. We need a question in there. I can see it in my console as, where is this here? Goal load, select goals.star from goals, where goals.project ID equals 1, and project ID is 49. Update goals, set project date. Yeah, this is the update. I'm totally stumped as why this is happening. Any insight? Okay. So we'll say this is Ruby on Rails, active record, Rails, active record. Rails models. Cool. All right. Let's review our question, which we already did. It's ready to publish. Method to pull all child objects is updating child objects. I guess that's as clear as can be. I think this is good. We'll post our question. I think we're going to wrap with that there today. I'm really happy, at least with where we've gotten this to. We've managed to break out our code in our view that was showing the daily, weekly, quarterly, and yearly projects. We put that into a partial to clean up our view, and now we're using that partial in multiple different places. We're using it on the project's index page right here. We've got all our different sections of goals, and we're also using it on any of these individual sub-projects. If we look here, now all of a sudden every individual sub-project has its goals. Now, obviously, the design for the sub-project pages needs to be updated to be similar to this one. We still need to add the to-dos and the journals to the index page, but we're getting closer. We're making progress every day, just a little bit. This was a nice quick 45-minute video. Hopefully I can get this edited and get this out tonight. I'm excited to be making progress on this website because the more it comes together, the more I'm able to use it to really keep my goals and my to-dos and my journal entries and my projects organized and be able to just sit down at a glance and say, oh man, it's a new week. Next week, it's going to be week 21. Let's review. What were my goals for the previous week? What are my goals for quarter 2? You know, I'm still in the second quarter of the year. What are my goals for that? What do I need my goals for this week to be in order to stay focused in the direction I need to be going in, and just staying on track and slowly iterating day by day, just building a piece of the pyramid every day. Because, you know, it often feels like the places that we want to be, the places that we know we can get to in our head, sometimes they feel so far away that feels like there are just too many steps between here and there where we need to be. And somehow by breaking it all down and just picking off one piece every day, piece by piece by piece, putting another piece on that pyramid, we get closer day by day. And that at the end of the day, that makes me feel good. So this is how I'm working hard to stay productive and motivated and sane during quarantine. I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to hear what you're working on, what you are doing to be able to continue to, you know, keep the ball rolling even when the economy is shut down. What a challenge this is. It'll be fun to look back on this in 20 years and be like, man, look what we were going through, stuck at home or stuck in my photo studio for months. It's been like almost two months as of today. Today was the last day I worked 2 months ago, March 14th. Wow. And it looks like we got another month or 2, maybe 3 of quarantine to go. So there you have it. Quick little coding session. Be back tomorrow, hopefully with something different. Maybe something outdoors, maybe a skating video. I think it'll be nice to get out of the studio, get some fresh air. It's a beautiful day outside today. I'm not going to get to see any of it because I got to go and edit this video now. So anyways, enough with that. I will see you back here tomorrow. Bye.